Hello all, welcome to the course of Complete Guide to Create REST API with Node.js and Express. I'm really excited to have you on board. Let's see what we are going to cover in this video by understanding the first and important element of our journey, and that is Node.js. So what is Node.js? So as per the definition, Node.js is a JavaScript runtime built on Chrome's V8 engine. And in short, Node.js is the largest ecosystem. It is a production proven environment, and Node.js is used in thousands of companies in a large application. Again, it's an open source. It runs on a various platform. We can run it on Windows, Linux, Mac, etc. Right? So you might be wondering what Node.js can do. So Node.js can generate dynamic page content. It can create, read, write, delete files on the server. Node.js also collect from data, and Node.js can add, delete, modify data in your database. So one can use Node.js for create entire web application. But in this course, we will be only talking about the REST APIs. Alright, and to perform the REST APIs, we are again using an Express framework. Now this Node.js Express framework is again a popular middleware. So Express is a minimal and a flexible Node.js web application framework that provides a robust set of features to develop web and mobile applications. It facilitates the rapid development of Node-based web application, and some of the features are: it allows us to set up middleware to respond to HTTP requests, define a routing table which is used to perform a different action based on HTTP method and URL. Make sense? So we will be using this Express as our middleware for our Node.js application. So what is REST API? So REST API is an acronym for Representational State Transfer, an almost meaningless description of the most used web service technology. REST is a way for two computer systems to communicate over HTTP in a similar way to web browser and servers. Sharing data between two or more systems has always been a fundamental requirement for a software development, and we will be creating the REST API throughout the course. Then what we are going to learn during the entire course. So during the entire course, we will be creating the REST APIs using that MS SQL database, and also with the end of the course, I have added 2 more videos how we can make a connectivity to MySQL and MongoDB. Make sense? Then we are going to learn some important features of best practices, how we can store the production and development configuration in file, and how we can use that. Then we will also cover the exception handling. In that exception handling, we will be storing some of the we can say errors in our JSON file, and then we will throw the respected error message whenever it is required. Then we are also going for authentication. We are also going to cover JWT, that is JSON Web Token, and then we can also see how we can manage authentication in our Node.js application. Then we will also see how we can debug our application. We will put a debugger. Then we can see how we can use a logger in our Node.js application. Then we can see how we can deploy it to our cloud server, and many more. So let's get started. So yes, for downloading or installing the Node.js, to your local machine, we are just navigating to this nodejs.org, the official documentation for Node.js, and there you can download the stable version. So while recording this video, the stable version is 12.18.1, so it might be differ when you are watching this video. Alright, so I have already downloaded the stable release for me in my local machine, so I will not do it again. So you just click over here and download the required setup and just follow the instruction in the setup, and that is it. You are ready to go with your Node.js. So now what I'll do, I'll open up my command prompt, and on my command prompt you first need to check whether the Node.js is installed correctly or not. So here I can just write a command node-v, and then we can check which version of Node.js we are running on my local system. And for the node package manager, again we have to write npm-v, and that will display which version of node package manager we are using in our local machine. Alright, and one more thing we can check with whether the node is installed correctly or not. We can simply run the node, and then we can write any of the expressions. So let us say 2 plus 2, and that will run. Make sense? So yes, we have installed Node.js correctly on our local machine. Now let us try to create our first Hello World application. We will be creating a Node.js application from the scratch, and for that first we have to create a Node.js application. So over here I'll be open up my command prompt, and I'll navigate it to the directory where I want to create my Node.js application, and here I will say npm and init, and then it will prompt us for some of the name like package name, version. So I'll just hit enter and go with the default values. So what it will do, it will just create a package.json file for us. So I'll just close this terminal, and if I just open that REST API project with my IDE, as an IDE I'll be using VS Code. You can use whatever the IDE you like. So this is the package.json file which got generated when we write that npm init. Make sense? So before starting with anything with Node.js, we first need to create a server for HTTP, right? To handle our request or to run our request, right? So what I'll do on my package.json, we can write the dependencies tag over here, or what I can do is I can open up my Google Chrome and I can search for that npm packages. So this is the package for HTTP. So I can copy this, and I'll on my terminal, what I'll do is over here I'll open up that integrated terminal. That VS Code comes with an integrated terminal, and I can write that command npm install and http. Now that will install that dependency in my package.json file. Over here you can see it has added the dependency, and this is http. Make sense? And if you know the dependency, you can directly write over here, like say for example https, and here you can also name the version number, and then what you can do is over here you can also use that npm install. So that will do the same thing what that command will do for us. So whatever you want, you can write it over there, right? The next step, we need to create our first file. So here I could say index.js. While we run through that wizard writing that npm init, there is a question like what should be your entry point, and I have already gone with the default value, and the default name is index.js. So on my index.js, what I'll do is I'll use that HTTP package we just install. So over here I could say require, and inside that I'll be using that HTTP package, and then I could say const and I could say server, and here I could use that HTTP instance and I could say create server. Now that create server, you need to pass a callback function. So inside that create server, as in parameter, I'll be writing a function with a two parameter, request and response, right? So if you are new to the REST APIs, I'll just briefly introduce you. This request is an object which we are passing from our front end, or you can say from our Postman or a REST client, and this response is an object which we are giving back to the user. And if you want to read more about that request and response, I'll share the document attached with this lecture. So over here, what I can do is I could say response.end, and over here I could say hello world. Make sense? And then finally we will say start our server on some port, right? So here I could say server.listen, and here you have to specify a port number on which you want to listen your Node.js application. So over here I could say listen it on port number 3000, and if we save everything, and now if we open up the terminal again and let us rerun the application, so over here I could say index.js, so node and then file name, which file you want to run. So if everything went correct, and now let me just open up the browser, and here let me just check localhost colon 3000. All right, and if everything went correct, you can see that hello world is running. This is how we can create our first hello world application with the Node.js. Now with the next video, what I'll do is I'll create an application in which we can create a simple CRUD operation with MS SQL database. So now we have to install Microsoft SQL Server 2017 Express Edition. You can use any of the Express Edition. I'm just using 2017, so I'm just navigating to this Microsoft official website, and there you can just press this download, and then you can go with the instruction for the setup, and then just press next, and then you are good to go with Microsoft SQL Server 2017. Alright, then after having installed that SQL Server Express Edition, you will also require to download SQL Server Management Studio, that is SSMS. Now you can just press this download SQL Server Management Studio, and again you just go with the installer, and then you are good to go, and you can use that SSMS. So I have installed both SQL Server Management Studio as well as that Express Edition. So now on my SSMS SQL Server Management Studio, I have created one user, and here I have selected the authentication to SQL Server authentication, and here I have to pass my username and password so that I can connect to my SQL Server database. And on this database directory, you can see I have already created a demo database, and if you are new how to create a database using that SQL Server, you can just right click on this database and just create new database. Make sense? And then inside this demo database, navigate to this tables, and here you can just right click on the table and you can just create a new table. Make sense? So it's just easiest thing. And I have created this product table, and that product table is having 5 columns: ID, name, price, description, and quantity. Simple, nothing fancy, right? And it is having, I think, 1 or 2 record already inserted, so we can fetch the records. And what I'll do is we have one testing data over here. So what I'll do is I have created a store procedures for that. For fetching the products, I have this get all products, and for adding a product, I have this add product, delete product, update product and find product by ID. So this is my store procedure for getting all products, and it is just returning us all the columns. So here I'm using select star from product. In this course we will make direct queries as well as we will use store procedures. So I'll just briefly give you introduction about this store procedures. So store procedures are nothing but a subroutine function which already stored our query, just we will pass the parameter, right? So over here we are just adding a new product to the table. The name of store procedure is add product. Same way we'll have delete and update products. So here you can see the delete product also, and the same way update product. So over here you can see we have this much store procedures. Make sense? And I'll also show you how we can write a direct query from Node.js application, right? But mostly throughout the course we will be using store procedures whenever it is possible. Alright, so now on my application, in our Node.js application, we will require one, you can say, mediator, or one you can say one layer which can talk to your database MS SQL. So to do so, what I'll do is I'll just open here and search for npm and MS SQL package. Now this package is just responsible to talk with your database MS SQL, right? So if you want to make a connection with MySQL, you can also use that connector. And in this course even we will see how we can connect to different databases, MySQL, MongoDB and so on, right? So over here on my application, I'll open up the terminal window, and as I told you, we need to write that MS SQL plugin. Alright, so I'll be installing that MS SQL, and the next plugin we will require that Express framework. So what I'll do, I'll also copy this Express, and on our Node.js application we will need to install that Express also. So what we are using is like Express, MS SQL and a Node.js application. Make sense? And this is got installed, and if you open up your package.json file, you can see on dependencies you will have two more dependency about Express and MS SQL. So now we can use that package in our applications. Alright, as a next step, what I'll do is I'll create a class which can make a connection to my database. And for that, what I'll use is I'll use this documentation of MS SQL plugin, and here they have mentioned how we can create a class and we can pass the parameters, and it has a connect method, and inside that connect method we need to pass our configuration. Alright, so if you want to read more about that MS SQL plugin, you can use its documentation. And right now on our application, what I'll do is I can create a connection class. So on my solution explorer, what I'll do is I'll create one file and I'll name it like dbconnection.js. Alright, and now inside that dbconnection.js, I'll create a method which will connect through my MS SQL plugin to my database. So over here I could say const, and I could say that MS SQL, and I'll say require, and I'll point through that MS SQL, right? And now I'll create a class. I name it to DB connection, and we need to export this. So over here I could say module.exports and new DB connection. So this is a skeleton, or you can say blueprint how we can create a class, and then inside that DB connection class I'll create my method and I'll use that async and await, because if the statement will take a time to execute, you can know that all the calls in this JavaScript application are asynchronous, right? So I am saying that we need to wait for this statement to be executed. So we are using that async and await keyword, and over here I could say get connection, and inside that method I will be using try catch to handle the error, and over here I'll just say whatever the error, just I'll use console.log and error. Right now we are not throwing the error back to the user or something, we are just printing it on a console, but later with the course we will also see how we can deal with an errors. And inside that try I could say return await, and I could say SQL MS SQL object dot connect. Now this connect is a method of that MS SQL plugin, right? And inside that method we need to pass our database object, and for that what I can do is I can simply create a database object over here with the username, password, server name and database name. So these are my local configuration, like username is SA, password is SA, server is localhost, database name is demo. So whatever whatsoever is your configuration for your local database, for this MS SQL database, you can pass it over there. So in my case the database name is demo, all right, and rest are the all the configuration to connect my MS SQL server. So this is how our first file will look like, and I'll name it to dbconnection.js. Now as a next step, what I will do is I'll just open up my solution explorer, I'll create one more directory, I'll name it to modules, and inside that modules we need to create let us say one more directory, and I'll name it to product. So what I'll do, I'll organize everything related within a product table inside that product module. So inside that product directory I'll create a product.controller.js. so over here I could say product.controller.js. then again I'll create one more file, again inside that I could say product.js, and last file is product.mssql.js. alright, so this mssql.js file will require our DB connection file, because here on this DB connection we are making a connection to our database, right? So what I'll do on my mssql product.mssql.js file, first we need to import that product DB connection over here. So over here what I'll do is I'll say const, I'll say mssql connection, and then what I'll do is I'll give a path to that DB connection file, right? So what I'll do, I'll say double dash, and here you can say db connection.js. so it's just double dash is moving up to the directory, right? So now what I'll do is I could say class, and this is my product mssql class, and inside that class what I can do is here I can again create a method, and I'll name it to get all products, and finally we need to export this. So over here I could say module.exports and new product mssql class. Alright, now inside this get all products method, what I'll do is I'll first call my get connection method. So over here I could say mssql connection object dot get connection. Now this will make a connection to my database, right? And here this statement will take a time to execute. So over here I'll be using that await keyword, right? This is what we already used over here. Same way, after a completion of this execution, what I want to do is I want to make a query to the database. So over here I could say const and result, and then I could say same object, connection object dot, here we can use the request, so that everything is mentioned in MS SQL plugin, and then we can write our query method. So over here we can specify our query. So over here I'll say select star from product, and then I will show you how we can call the store procedures as a next. But first I want to show you how you can directly query to your table, and then what I'll do is I'll say return and response. Now, but obvious, this statement will take some time in executing your query. So if we didn't specify await over here, it won't wait for this statement to be finished, and it will return us the result. And but obvious, that's a null or undefined, right? So instead of that, we can also use the await keyword. So we are saying like wait for this statement to execute first and then move to this request. Making sense? So right, we created one method, and now on my product class, what we have to do is we will import that MS SQL class over here. So over here I could say product MS SQL, and then I'll say require, and I'll give a path to it. So over here product MS SQL, and I'll create a class product, and finally we need to module dot exports and new product. Making sense, guys? Now inside that I'll be using again async and await. Get all products is my method, but now this method will have two arguments, request and response. And as I told you, request is an object we are supplying from our front end, and response is an object we are giving back to the user. Alright, so now inside that get all product, what I'll do is I'll be using try and catch. Just try and catch for if there is an error, we will deal with an error handling. So over here I could say console.log and log my error, and inside that try, what I'll do is I'll use that object of this product MS SQL class, and I'll call my get all product method. So over here I'll create a variable const output, and I could say await and product MS SQL dot get all products. Alright, and we will wait till this method will be executed. And finally what I'll do is this response is an object which goes back to the user. So over here I could say result response dot send, and I want to send my result back. Making sense? Now we need to create a controller. So on my controller, what I'll do is I'll just import that product class. So I could say const, and here I could say product, and then I will say require, and here let me specify a product class. Then again I could create a class, and I'll name it, let us say product controller, and inside that controller I'll be having one constructor. That constructor required one parameter, so I'll name it app, and inside that constructor I'll be using over here module dot exports, and we need to finally export my controller. Right now here inside that constructor I will require router object. Alright, so what I'll do is I'll be here importing const, and over there I could use that express object. So over here I could say express, and here I can make it require, and I could say express. Now this is the framework we have installed earlier, and then what I can do is over here I can create another object router, and that router I could say express dot router. Alright, so here I'll be using that router method, and now what I can do is I can use that router object, and on my class inside the constructor, what I'll do is I'll say router dot, if the method is type of post or get or put or delete. So here we will check the request type. So here I could say if the base path is there. So over here on my constructor I can use that app.use, and here we can specify our base path. So over here I could say use this as my base path. So I'll say products, and what I'll check on this get request, if there is nothing out after the base path, right? So I'll say if the path is empty, then go and call my from my product class, call that get all products method. Make sense? Alright, so far we have created DB connection. This will responsible to make a connection to my database. Now we are exporting this DB connection. So on my MS SQL file I am importing that DB connection. I am calling its method get connection, and here I am writing my statement or a query to be executed. Then on my product, here I will be checking the my request and response, and based on that I'll be calling my whatever the method I want to call. So get all products, and then on controller I'll define which method is to be called based on the request I received. Make sense? Now we need to create one index.js file, or you can say a module file, which will define which controller to be called and when. Alright, so now over here inside my module directory I'll create one more file, and I'll name it to index.js, and this file will define which module or which controller we need to call and when. Alright, so based on our request it will call the controller. So over here I could say a module, and inside that module I'll be creating a constructor. So constructor will require an object. So here I'll initialize it with my local object. So I'll say this dot app equals to app, and then I'll create one method, init method, and inside that init method I will initialize my controller. So over here I could say product controller, and I'll give a path to that product controller. So inside that require I'll say alright, from product directory get my product controller, and then I could say product controller and this dot app. Alright, so I'm just passing this reference what we have received to this app. Making sense? And finally what I'll do is module dot exports, and I'll export this module. Make sense? Alright, do not forget to use this exports. So here on all my class I am just using that, and yes, here on a product controller as you can see we have used this class syntax, but we have not make it new. So instead we can write a new, or we can remove this. So I'll just remove that. So that's it, we already created a module files. Now it's time to create app.js file. So on our root level, on our application level, right after that package.json, what I'll do is I'll create one more file, and I name it to app.js. And inside that app.js, what I'll do is I'll just initialize my application level setting. So here I could say I'll be using that express over here. So over here I could say const app, and I want to use that express. So first we need to import the express. So over here I could say const and express, and now I could say require, and I'll use my express package, Make sense? Then I could say let us say const app, and I want to use that express method, and then what I'll do is I'll create one method and I'll name it to init method. So here I'm not creating a class, so we are using a JavaScript syntax, and we are creating a function, and the name of function is init. And inside that init method, what I'll do is I'll be using my module. So over here I could say const and app routing, because that request will flow to this init, and this init will flow this request to our module file. So over here I could say require, and then what I'll do is I could say modules, and next I'll say const app modules, and now I'll say new app routing. Make sense? And here we are passing our object app, and now this app is an object of this express, or you can say it is a reference to that express framework. Make sense? And then what I'll do is app module. Now this app module is an object of this app routing module, and we have init method over there also. So here on my product module, you can say dot init. Alright, finally we are calling this init function. So here I could say init, so that will execute that function while this app.js is called, and then I could say module.exports, and I'll export my object app. Make sense? Now this index.js is the first file which got executed when you run your application, right? Sorry, this is not the index.js. We have to call the root index.js, right? So this is our root file which got executed when we serve our application, right? So we need to call app.js over here. So what I'll do is I'll just get rid of this, and instead of that I'll just create index.js so that we can make a request to that app.js. So over here I could say const and app, that will require app.js. So over here I could say app, and then what I'll do is const and server, and I could say require, then I'll make an HTTP as in package dot, we need to create our server. So I'll say use that app as your object. Make sense? And so from line number 3 it will call our app, and in app.js it will execute our init method, and from that init method over here it will goes to that modules, and from that modules over here it will comes to this, and from here it will goes to that product controller. So now over here on product controller it will call our getAllProduct method, and from here it will execute my MS SQL file, and it will call to the database. This is how the application flow is going on. Making sense? Now on index.js, as a next step, what I'll say is server.listen, and then I will listen on whatsoever port number you want. So here I'll specify the port number, then you can specify the host name. So here I could say localhost, and that's it. As a third argument, you can create the list function. So I could say that function, and I want to listen the server, and over here I could say console.log, and I could print a message server started. Alright, so now if everything went correct, and if we start our server by writing node and index.js, Alright, so we have an error, app routing is not a constructor. Alright, so we have one typo over there. So if we navigate to this app.js over here, so it is showing the error is on line number 9 on app.js. So let me just find the error. So it is showing the error over here, it is not a constructor. So that's on my module. Here we have made a typo, we need to write the class name. So class name is module, right? So now if we rerun the application again, and if we can save and rerun it again, and now it is showing us server is started. And now on my browser, if I say localhost 4001 slash API slash v1, this is my base path and this is my controller products. And if everything went correct, you can see we have the result. Alright, so this is how by default result it is returning to us. Instead we can you can see like it is returning us the result two times, right? So it is returning us two different objects, record sets and record set, right? So whatever the result we want to send back to the user, we can use any one of them. So on our application, while we are just returning the response on our MS SQL file, we can write over there response dot record set. So here I could say record set. Make sense? So that will now again I'll say rerun the application, and if you run this again, you can see we will have only record. Alright, now in next video we will complete the CRUD operation within product table. We will write the path for add, update and delete. So I just tried to explain that how that request flows in our Node.js application to the pictorial representation. So whatever the request you made from your client, first it goes to index.js, which is our default entry point for our Node.js application. Then from that index.js to it will went to app.js, and from that app.js to it will went to the modules index.js, and there we register our all of the controllers, and our controller holds the path. So based on that from that product controller, our request will flow to the product.js class. There we have our method, which in turns invokes that product MS SQL class, and then using that DB connection we will make a connection to the database, and then vice versa. So in database will respond send back to the DB connection through that product MS SQL, then again it flows to the controller and then back to the client. Making sense? This is how our request will flow in that Node.js application. So in this video what I'll do is we will see how we can call the store procedure instead of writing the direct query over there. So what I'll do is instead of this query, we will just call our execute method. So and then inside that execute method we can write the name of our store procedure. So over here I could say get all products. Make sense? And now if I save everything and let me just reload the server, so I could say node and index.js, and if I open up the again the records, yes, the data is displaying, but now this time it is displaying through the store procedures, right? So now as in next what we will do, we will write the methods for add, update and delete, and we will see how we can perform that CRUD operation through the store procedures, right? So what I will do as a next, I'll just copy and paste the methods over here. So I already created this add product, and inside that add product, as you can see, it is having some parameters, input parameters, and that input parameters are the variable name, or you can say a scalar variable, which we have already created on a store procedure. Alright, so this name should be the same: product name, price, description. Alright, and then finally execute, I'll be calling my store procedure. Making sense? Same way we are creating a method for update, delete, and find product by ID. Alright, now on my product class, what I need to do is we need to make you can say functions for calling that methods. So over here I can just duplicate this, and what I'll do is, instead of this get all products, I could say add product, request and response are there. And now what I'll do is, instead of this get all product, I can call my add product method. Now inside this add product method, we need to pass an object which we have sent through our front end. Alright, or you can say with our request. So over here I can use that request dot body, because we will pass the object through our body only, right? So over here I could say add product, and here we are using request dot body. At the same way we will be using this again, and we will call that let us say delete product. And on delete product, what I will do is we are not sending the ID in a body. Instead we will send the ID to the parameter on your URL. So on delete, what I'll do is I'll create one more variable. I'll say it ID, and what I'll do is request dot params, and from the params I could get the ID. Alright, and what I'll do inside that try, I'll write the if, and I'll say if there isn't an ID, just I want to print an error message. Here I can say console.log, and ID is not passed. Alright, and when we see how to deal with an error handling, we will also see how we can cover the exception for this. But as of now we are just logging the error, and if there is an ID, instead of this request.body, I will pass that ID as my parameter. So here what I'll do, I'll call the product MSSQL dot delete product, and on delete product I'll pass the ID. Making sense? Then as a next argument I'll create one more method, and I'll name it to update, and I change it to update, and update is the same like an add. So what we will do is we will just pass the body over there. So instead of that delete, we will call that update product method, and inside that update product method we will pass our body. Make sense? Now then as a next we will need to create that find product by ID. So over here I could say async, or we can simply copy that, and here we can say find product by ID. Alright, again we will need an ID, and over here instead of calling this method I'll call the find product by ID. Make sense? So we have created 5 different methods. One is for get all products, one is for add product, delete product, update, and find by ID. Now on my controller we have to define its path. So on my product controller over here we need to define path for every path for every method we need to call. So over here first we will define the path for that ID. So I'll copy this, paste over here, and over here I could say that should be a parameter path, and I name it to ID, and if it is there, I want to call that let us say products dot find product by ID. Make sense? Then again I will check if the router dot request type is post, and if there is nothing apart from base path, then I could say call my product dot add product method. Make sense? Then again I could say router dot request is type of put, and here I'll check the request, and again I'll say if there is nothing in the path apart from the base path, I'll say call my update product, and finally we will call our delete method. So over here I could say call the delete, and on delete we can check for a parameter, and I'll name it to ID. Alright, so here I could say product dot delete product. Making sense, guys? So this is how we define the routes, and then finally routes are defined. We already registered it. We have to do one adjustment on our app.js. Because we are sending a data through our body, we need to import or we need to install a package, and the package named body parser, right? So on our first we have to download that body parser package, and on our package.json. So I'll open up that package.json file over here, and on my package.json file I'll install that body parser package, right? And as I told you, if you know the dependency, you can write it inside the dependency, or just go and search for npm body parser package, and then you will have the command. After in writing that dependency over there, we need to write npm install so that our dependency got downloaded, right? After that we can use it on app.js. So on our app.js we first need to make an import for body parser. So over here on my app.js, what I'll do is I'll say const, I could say body parser, that should be required, and then I could say use that body parser package. Making sense? Then what we can do is we can use that body parser to limit our body. So by default limit of that body parser package is up to 4 MB. You know, if you pass a object greater than 4 MB, then Node.js will not able to handle that. So later on in this course we will also talk about uploading the files. So what I'll do over here, I'll say the JSON limit to 50 MB, and the same way I'll say URL and code limit to 50 MB. So if we upload a file still 50 MB, it won't give us any error. Making sense? Now if I close everything and let us try to rerun the server. So over here I could say node index.js, and let us check our postman. This postman is required to make a call to the APIs, right? So what I can do is I can create a separate method for it. So first method I created is a get, and on a get I'm making a call to my server, and the URL is 4001, and let us try whether it got succeeded or not, right? So yes, it is able to fetch the records. So now what I'll do is I'll save the request first, and I can save it to my collection. So the collection is named to products app backend. So here you can search for that collection. Here you can search products app backend. Alright, so I am storing it inside that, and I'll give it a name. So here I could say get all products, so that can, you can share this entire document to your team. So I'll save to the products. Make sense? And now what I'll do for adding a new product, I'll copy this entire object. Make sense? Then what I'll do, I'll create a new API, a new request, and I'll change the method to post, and I'll paste the object on a body, and on body I'll say row, and here I'll paste it. In our insert add product, we don't need to pass the product ID because it's an auto generated column. So here I just pass 4 argument, name, price, description, and here I could say tasting 2, and the price I'll change to 100.50. This is my description, and quantity I'll say 120. Making sense? Whenever we are making a post request, it is mandatory to pass an header. So here I'll say content type, and I'll say application JSON. Making sense? And I'll copy the endpoint URL over here, paste it over here. Make sense? And now we will try to send a post request and wait for the response. Yes, now the record has been added to the database. Let us check our database first. So this is our product table, and if we open up this table, we can see that should be 2 records, right? So now it is only 1 record. So let me just check for the error first. It is just we have to refresh it. This is how it is displaying the records. So tasting 2, price is 100.50 and quantity is 120. Alright, so I'll back to this postman. I'll again save this to my collection. I'll name it to like add product, so that when we share this document with anyone, it will be able to understand, and we will store it to the product app backend. Make sense? Now we will try to make a delete call. So over here, instead of my API 4001, I could say 9001 to 4001, and here I'll pass my ID to 2, and again I should make a call to the server, right? Again it will try to delete a record with the ID of 2, and here if we check on our database, there isn't any record with the ID of 2. So that is why it shows an output 0 rows affected. That means there shouldn't any record deleted. Now which record we want to delete? With the ID of 3. Alright, so we will pass the parameter, you can say the ID, and now the ID is 3, and now again if we make a request, you can see the affected rows is 1. And now if we refresh the table over here, so you can see that record is removed from the database. Make sense? Now we will try for the update method. So first let me just save this request, and now what we will do, we can try this for the same update method. So what I'll do is on that add product, I'll just copy the entire object over here, and I'll create another request, and on that another request I'll change the type to put, and on my body I'll paste that copied object over here. Alright, but now with the update we need to pass the product ID, which record we want to update. So over here I could say product ID, and now we have only 1 record with a product ID of 1. So over here I could say tasting 1, then my price would be 150.50, then we'll have the quantity to 100. Alright, and now we need to pass the URL over here. So I'll copy the endpoint, paste it over here. On an update we didn't require to pass the parameter through the URL because we are passing it through the body. On the headers we need to pass content type application JSON. Alright, and now we will try to make a put call to our API, and let us check. Again it is saying rows affected to 1. Now let us open our database. Instead of this tasting data, it should display test data 1. So if we check, again that is tasting 1, price is also updated and quantity is also updated. So our service is are working as expected. Alright, again I'll share this endpoint on my collection so that we can easily share it with our backend team or our front end team. So I'll save it, I'll name it, let us say I'll name it to update product. Alright, and same collection. Make sense? That is how we will perform a basic CRUD operation with our Node.js application. Alright, to summarize everything, what we have done so far, we have created that dbconnection.js file. In real world, it is not like this. We are not storing our configuration to the file hard coded. Instead, in a real application, we will have some of the different module, like we have development environment, we have a production environment, staging, testing. So we want to run the configuration according to which environment we are running. So we will see in the next video how we can use this same architecture with the best practices. So this is the file which talks with an database. Then we created a product.mssql file. So there we are executing our store procedures, or you can simply file your queries over here, right? So then we have created a product controller and a product class, and that product class will pass the parameters through the request body or through the params. Make sense? And here we can validate whether the we send the check for the ID, whether we can validate it, or everything we can do it over here. Alright, so we will see how we can do the validations later on in the course. Then we'll have that product controller. Here we are defining all the paths for our product controller. Making sense? And then we are registering our module. So inside that modules we have the index.js, and based on this we are passing request to our controller. And app.js is the file, it's the first file which transfer your request to the modules. Making sense? So have your request flowing from one file to another. First file to be run is your index.js. From that index.js you are using app.js. From the app.js to your module index.js. Then from that module to your controller, controller to class, and class to MSSQL. Making sense? Okay, in the next lecture we will see how can we use the best practices.